drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer,
Good evening once again, and welcome to Doctor on Call. This evening, folks, we are talking about strokes. And with us, for the very first time on our Doctor on Call program, and I'm very happy and very pleased to have Dr. Andy Bernard. Dr. Bernard, he operates, or he practices in Grenville in St. Andrew. If I'm not mistaken, it's probably the first time we're having a doctor from the outer parish on the program, and I'm extremely happy to welcome Dr. Bernard. Dr. Bernard, good evening and welcome to Doctor on Call.
Hi, good evening. Thanks. What a pleasure. What a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. This evening, Doc, we want to talk about strokes. As a matter of fact, on October 29th, 2 days from now, will be World Stroke Day. And that will be the topic of our discussion. Usually, we hear someone died or someone got a stroke. When we hear something like that, exactly what is it? What happens to someone when we hear that someone has a stroke? Exactly what happens to them?
Okay, pleasant good night to all listening and viewing persons out there. It is a pleasure, and it's always wonderful to educate and get the population and as many persons as possible to understand not only about stroke, but to understand about their illnesses. In the past, many people would have gone to the doctor and left, and sometimes after leaving the office, they would not even remember what the doctor would have told them. So, it's a different era. We need to, educate ourselves, understand about diseases, and stroke is just one of them. What we hope to achieve tonight is a couple of things. As you said, we need to really understand what it is by stroke. The majority of persons have an idea what a stroke is, because many would call and say, Doc, I think my mom or my relative, my neighbor has a stroke. So we're going to get into that. Now, it's fitting that World Stroke Day is approaching, because before we used to think that only people who were very old would get stroke. But we see the change in lifestyle practices. People even younger than 50, or sometimes even under 40, which is quite uncommon, are now having stroke. So it does present an important topic tonight. Stroke, to begin. In a simple way of putting it, a simple definition, there are lots of definitions out there, but for the population, for people to understand, it's a rapid loss of brain function due to disturbances, due to problems in the blood supply to the brain. And this usually lasts more than 24 hours. Now, an easy way to get persons to understand, and I like to explain to my patients so that they understand. Imagine you have a pipe running towards your house, a PVC pipe running towards your house, and that supply of water is interrupted, it's blocked. Then you can't get water in your house. It's the same principle that applies in stroke. So it's really a loss, this rapid loss, and that word is important. It's a rapid loss, a sudden loss of function to the brain and so forth.
And when that happens, of course, the like any other organ in the body, for good function, blood is very important, and the brain being one of the key, we have problems. So when that happens, take us through what follows. So there is a rapid loss of blood supply to the brain. What follows that?
Good. So the brain definitely is a very vital organ. It's always a medical joke that all the organs in the body were fighting, and everyone was saying, well, I'm more important than you. So the heart decided to shut down. Then everyone died. The lungs, the liver, the brain. So we all need all these important organs. And what I'm saying is that the brain is a very complex structure, and it's important in so many functions. We have movement. It's the center, the tower that controls speech, consciousness, vision. It interprets. So the brain is a very important function. The tissues of the brain, the cells of the brain, they're very important. They need glucose. They survive on that. And they need to maintain a good supply to give them a great supply of oxygen and nutrients. So when that blood supply is cut short, the cells of the brain, they starve or they die. And this is the principle behind stroke. And when these cells starve and die, you have areas of the brain depending on where that blood supply goes to. And that's translated into what type of stroke and the signs and symptoms you would see of the stroke. And this is what really explains what happens. And then, because we know that it's involved in all the nervous functions, movements, the motor movements, the sensory movements, being able to touch, you can lose all these things. And this is where the signs and symptoms we'll go into later will show us what really happens.
Right. So, Doc, can someone actually tell? Are there any signals before someone actually, that rapid loss, that stoppage? Are there any signals that one can look for? As it relates to getting a stroke?
Yes. There are what we call the warning signs. The warning signs. Sometimes before you get the warning signs, there are certain basic things that we need to manage. Our lifestyle. Our lifestyle is very important. And we say the risk factors, we call them. What are the risk factors? What do persons have that may lead them to getting a stroke? We have to look at high blood pressure, which pops up number one right around. If we do not control our blood pressure properly, these are risk factors. Obesity. We have to avoid that sedentary lifestyle and exercise. We have to avoid excessive alcohol and smoking. Manage our diabetes properly. So we have to do as many things to control our cholesterol, because these are risk factors that can contribute towards a stroke. And then we can move to the warning signs. The warning signs, you can have headache, sudden headache. And sudden headache can be an indication that, and that headache is getting worse, that can be an indication. You need to act upon it. It's a headache that's not the usual headaches that you would have. Someone can become confused, sudden confusion, and they may have trouble speaking or understanding. So, for example, we are sitting, speaking to each other, and then all of a sudden, that person's speech becomes different, mumbled, muffled. So these are some of the signs, and they usually come on suddenly. Dizziness, and dizziness can be also a warning sign. Dizziness, sudden loss of balance, and you're dizzy. It's not just the regular dizziness, you feel a little dizzy because you're out in the garden and you're working heavy and so forth, and you didn't drink enough water. But it could be associated with other things like numbness of the face, the arm or leg. These are what most people know and are fearful of when they feel that numbness in the face, the arm or the leg, particularly on one side. Trouble with seeing. Suddenly you just can't see well, either in one or both eyes. Trouble walking, including the dizziness that we mentioned there. So these can happen together. So you're walking and you find that one leg or one limb, you're not able to raise it suddenly. So these are some of the most common and striking warning signs and symptoms, we call them, that can indicate, apart from the risk factors that we mentioned.
Now, Doc, our people, we have the tendency to diagnose ourselves, so we probably, maybe he was in the garden working or doing something, and then you get the sharp headache or something, and you feel the pain, and then the usual diagnosis is, I was in the hot sun, and so I just need to lie down and rest, drink some water and lie down and rest. You feel these things. Is it should people take these things for granted? I mean, you get the headache or you feel a little dizzy, and you feel, well, my blood low, the sun hot, I ain't drink enough water today. What would you say to people like that as it relates to the subject of discussion?
Well, what I usually like to tell most persons is, you need to know your body first of all, and you need to do regular checkups. After the age of 40, and it's become even earlier than that, you need to start checking up on that body. It's just like a vehicle, Mr. Godfrey. You have a vehicle and you're just driving, and then all of a sudden you break down on the road, and you never check oil, you never check, change a filter and anything like that. So, you have to know your body, you have to do checkups. And so especially after the age of 40, when, generally most people say that's the time when you start, going downhill, you have to work harder to maintain health. But what I usually say is this: you never take anything for granted. In medicine, there's a saying that we use in medical school that 1 + 1 is not 2 all the time.
Right.
Something that appears, something that appears simple could something big waiting to explode and so forth.
Right.
So what I want to get across is that, yes, most people have headaches, and headaches there are a number of causes for headaches, from simple dehydration, not drinking enough water, not getting enough sleep, stress-related headaches, tensional headache, migraine headaches. But the headache usually associated with strokes and so forth, you have to look for other things also. It's a headache that you don't usually have. And then all of a sudden it's intense, it's getting severe. And you may look for other symptoms too, that, your tongue is feeling heavy, your speech may change. Then these are things that you look for. And if you felt good and you recovered from sitting in the garden, then you should get checked. Because high blood pressure, many persons have high blood pressure and they do not know and do not have any symptoms of high blood pressure. They feel normal. So it warrants that you check up, but once it's stroke, any sign that you feel is sudden and it's not improving, you get it checked one time.
Right. So, Doc, I'm with someone, and we chatting, and and all of a sudden I notice some of the things that you're telling me. As the person looking on and seeing those things, what should I do?
Good. So you're chatting with someone, and all of a sudden their speech may have became slurred, heavy tongue. There's a simple guideline. Because stroke happens sudden and fast, there's a simple guideline that we use, and it's called, you could use that same word fast and make a quick assessment. So the F you can use for face. So you can ask the person to smile, and you look to see if there's a difference in one side of the face compared to the other.
Right.
And that will tell you, no, something's going on. This is normal. The A is arm. You can ask them to lift the arm above the head, and you can see a great difference in that one hand goes straight up and the other is lagging behind, or the person is unable, to get that arm up, right? The S is speech. And a trick that, is not really a trick, but, something that we usually call it tongue twisters, but it's not really a tongue twister, but you can use that, Godfrey, and there are many other examples. I usually like to use, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And you ask the person to repeat that, and you may hear them saying, that gives you an indication something is going on. And the T is time. Time to move, time to get that person in the vehicle, time to call 911, time to get moving. So this is a quick way in which you or anyone in Grenada can make an assessment, whether it be first-line workers, front-line workers, police officers, you're going to the beach, you're with a friend, family, home. People need to be able to identify that, and there's simple ways, and education is the best way, and this is one of the medium for that.
Right. So you did mention a blocked blood vessel. What about and your analogy early had to do with the PVC pipe being blocked. What about the PVC pipe busting?
That's right. Very good. So the stroke we mentioned, where we mentioned initially the general definition there are different types of stroke.
All right.
There are three main types. The one we mentioned is ischemic or thrombotic, where there's a blockage of blood flowing to an area, and the cells in that area of the brain, whether it be a small artery or whether it be a large artery, it depends on that area, and then you get whether a mild or a large stroke, and you get more areas involved. And that also determines on the recovery, the rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So the other type is hemorrhagic. And hemorrhagic, you can have a leak. That blood vessel can be leaking. And what is leaking? It's like you have a burst pipe with a slow leak.
Mm-hmm.
And that is leaking blood. And blood is entering into the tissue of the brain. And the brain is not able to deal with this blood that is flooding it. It's like drowning in its own blood. And the cells would eventually die. So that's the leaking part of it, and it's hemorrhagic. The other is when it bursts. So your pipe just breaks and water just sprays suddenly. So you see the severity. And you jump up from your bed and now because you hear water spraying and you've gone to see how you could stop that flow of water. It's a similar analogy where the blood vessel bursts and that brain is flooded with it. And this is a severe situation. That one can be life-threatening. And, God forbid, but this is the different type. There's also one that is called TIA. What does that mean? Transient ischemic attack. It's temporary. There's a blockage, but that blockage, that little piece of cloth that may have left somewhere, occluded for a short time, and then it passed its way again. Mm-hmm. So that person had all the signs and symptoms what we mentioned, maybe slurred speech, twisting of the mouth and so forth, heaviness of the tongue, numbness, but it resolved within 24 hours.
Right. Now, I have a question, a couple of questions to ask you on the different types of strokes, but we need to take a commercial break, and when we come back, I've got some more questions for you. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment. We'll take a short break. Don't go away. We'll be back.
It's new, innovative and classy, and a cut above the rest. Your one-stop shop for bathtubs, kitchenette, customized doors and windows, and even a new paint job. We also sell quartz and solid surface countertops. At M&N Hardware, we offer best prices, excellent service, efficiency, and reliability. Visit us at Dusty Highway, Grandin, St. George, or call telephone number 440-6757. M&N Hardware, from foundation to roof. Let's build together. The Esplanade Mall, something for everyone. Go on a shopping spree today and experience some magic.
Communal, we are adapting to meet the changing needs of our shareholders and members. Times are changing, and with the changing times comes a whole new way to do business. Our parents may have done their banking a different way. Communal's state-of-the-art online banking and international debit card allows members to do business with great ease. It's like literally having a branch in your very own hands. Need a loan? Apply online from the comfort of your own home anywhere in the world, and your request will be dealt with remotely. Want to transfer between your accounts or another shareholder? No wait time for transactions to update. Voila! Who needs receipts when you can receive them via e-statements on your mobile device and save the environment? Not a communal member? You can join our family today by applying online. At Communal, we see you working hard to ensure that you save, invest, and grow. Communal, join us today. This will be the best financial decision you have ever made.
Hills and Valley Medcare Center, located on Grenville Street, St. George's, has a highly professional team that gives excellent service in massage therapy, physiotherapy, speech therapy, medical consultation, and more. Hills and Valley Medcare Center sells a wide range of medical supplies, offers home visits for patients in Grenada and Carriacou, and opens Monday to Saturday, 10 a.m. through to 7 p.m. Visit or call Hills and Valley Medcare Center today, 435-6904.
You're already ill and have no time or energy to walk every which way to access your healthcare needs. So come to Spice Isle Imaging on the Carenage for a one-spot stop for all your health service needs. See our in-house doctor and get your meds from the pharmacy right on location. Digital X-ray, MRI, CT scans, mammography, ultrasound, and laboratory services are also available. So for that moment when life makes demands on you, you can make demands on us. Visit us at Spice Isle Imaging, Carenage, St. George's.
Ophio.com. Sale. All the outlets, hotspot outlets. You're going to go to the Carenage, the Grenville, or the Sutter's hotspot, and you get sales and deals on all items. You can get these on potato, you can get these on saltfish, onion, garlic, mackerel, toilet paper, and we even have the currants and the raisin at $10 per pound, lowest price island-wide. So people just come down or go up or go across, but just make sure and go to hotspots.
Drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer,
Welcome back, folks. It's Doctor and Call, and for those of you who joined us a little late, our Doctor on Call this evening is Dr. Andy Bernard, and we're talking about stroke. The 29th, well, 2 days from now, being World Stroke Day. All right. So, Doc, just before we went to the break, we mentioned the different types of stroke that one can have. Now, if someone is not hypertensive, can that person still come down with a stroke?
The answer is yes, because high blood pressure is just one of the causes that may lead to stroke. But persons can have other factors. Let's mention a few of them. with the buildup of plaque and cholesterol, we put a lot of emphasis on healthy eating and exercise and so forth. All these are important. Why? To help reduce the buildup of fats. The buildup of fats at the end of it forms something we call plaque. And this plaque sticks on the arteries and the blood vessels, and it keeps narrowing these blood vessels.
Okay.
And eventually, some of these plaques can break off, and these pieces of plaque can travel and occlude. So that person may not have had hypertension, but they would have had maybe atherosclerosis, and that consequently led to that. Persons could have had, let's say someone has problem with their valvulopathies, and this can also lead to clots leaving and traveling and going up and occluding or blocking a blood vessel. You can also have infections, and infections can send particles and so forth that travel and also occlude, right? And these what I mentioned here are those that are contributing towards ischemic. They are blocking the blood vessels and so forth. So you have embolos, which is the little clots and so forth, the plaque that breaks off. So these are factors other than high blood pressure. And then when we go to the side of the hemorrhagic, there are factors that weaken the blood vessels, right? So that's where cigarette smoking can come in. So, we smoke and you harden the arteries. So the arteries are not smooth and flexible as they used to be. So they have a tendency to rupture or break easily and so forth, right? So these are other factors that can contribute. Trauma can cause blood vessels to rupture. A blow to your head. And there's a space between, it's called the subarachnoid space, and that space is between the brain and that layer there. That blood can accumulate there. There's a thin sheet that covers there, and that blood can accumulate in that space, and you can also get that type of bleeding and stroke. So there are other factors besides high blood pressure, and so the answer is definitely
right. Now, what about there are people, for example, who are hypertensive, and they do take aspirin. So they may take the low dose, one a day, 81 milligrams, to help keep the blood thin and all of that, the prevention of cholesterol building up. Now, could that be? Could we have a sort of reverse effect then? For example, if you take too much blood thinners, can that result in hemorrhagic stroke?
Yes, it can. So that's why we have to be careful. You don't just go buying medications and people like to self-medicate.
Yes, indeed. Yes, yes, indeed.
Auntie and uncle, they have aspirin and they use aspirin, right? But it has its indication. Everything has its indication. And usually we always hear the aspirin thins the blood. That's something we grew up knowing. The job aspirin does, aspirin prevents cells in the blood called platelets, elements in the blood called platelets. It prevents them from lumping together. So, because platelets, what do they do? When your blood vessel, that same blood vessel we're talking about, when there's damage to that blood vessel there, the platelets, they go and they form a mesh, a nice mesh, and stop the bleeding, the blood vessel, so they repair that. They are also elements that are involved in the clotting factor. So, the baby aspirin helps prevent, especially in those persons that have conditions that can contribute to them having blood clots more often, especially diabetes mellitus. So that's where aspirin is recommended there. It's also used in the prevention of, persons at a certain age where your risk factor increases for coronary artery diseases, because it's a prevention. It decreases your risk factor. So the other side to that if you're using excessive amount or high doses of aspirin, yes, it can cause problem. And that's why when persons have stroke, you have to be able to distinguish whether it's an ischemic or thrombotic.
Okay.
Sorry, ischemic or hemorrhagic. Because if you're bleeding and you keep giving aspirin, if it's a bleeding stroke and you're still giving aspirin, then that's a problem.
Yes, indeed. Now, as it relates to a couple of things. One, people's age. Well, we did mention that nowadays we're seeing young people coming down with stroke, and that could possibly be because of lifestyles. But is age a major factor in someone getting a stroke? In other words, as someone get older, their risk of having a stroke increases?
Yes, it does. Your blood vessel, for one, gets weaker. And as your blood vessel gets weaker, you're more at risk for that blood vessel to rupture. The fact that plaque, that buildup of plaque, this is a process that goes on from young. And if you don't take control to reduce how fast this plaque builds up, then you're heading for problem.
Okay.
So that's why you always hear that preaching message out there: exercise, control your cholesterol. It's a process that starts from birth. Our body naturally makes cholesterol. Cholesterol is important in the cell wall, right? It's important in keeping that rigidity of the cell wall. That's the cells of our body. They have a wall, a membrane, and this cholesterol is important there. But that excess buildup of cholesterol, at the end of it, especially those unhealthy fats, contribute to the buildup of plaque, and that a condition we call atherosclerosis, and that causes narrowing, and some of the plaque can break off. So these are the two main factors. Yes, the blood vessel gets weaker, and that buildup of plaque, and that can happen in the heart itself, in the carotid artery that runs, the two that runs at the side there, and the plaque can break off there and move to arteries higher in the brain.
Right. What about ethnicity, race? Asians, Caucasians, Africans, African descent. Are we at a higher risk of getting stroke as compared to Caucasians, or let's say Asians, or whoever, whichever race?
You know, since school days, race has always popped up in there, and it's somehow, you know, the black race always has the higher risk and so forth. You know, I know in most studies why, but we are resilient people and so forth. But yes, our high blood pressure tends to be a more resistant blood pressure. Maybe, you know, you can relate that to many factors. Maybe the intensity of work that we can undergo and so forth. But yes, race does probably have a higher probability of stroke in the race, the black race and so forth, compared to the other races. But you know, lots of debate on that still. You know? Okay.
What about sex? Male, female? Are we? When I say we, I mean men. Are we at a higher risk than women?
Yes, we men tend to be at a higher risk, you know, than women. As we age, that tends to switch. And then at a later age, females tend to be more at risk of having a stroke and so forth. But you know, there are many reasons why. A lot of men don't go and get their pressure checked. They don't even visit the doctor.
Yeah, you know? Our ego.
Yeah, a lot
yes.
A lot of us, and I say a lot of us men and
no, of course, yes.
We don't want to be this strong and mighty and powerful. And high blood pressure is a silent killer. You know, and you may not get any symptoms and so forth, right? So, you know, this does play an important role. I mean, there are other hormones that may be involved in the regulation and so forth that reduces it, but this tends to be an important part also.
Right. What about the use, and we're talking to a women now. What about the use of things like birth control pills or hormone therapies, and so can they be risk as well for women?
There is a small measure of risk, yes, because most persons and females on birth control tend to have a high risk for DVT, deep vein thrombosis, because it makes they're at more risk. You get that clot developing, and that clot can travel. It can be in the popliteal vein that's behind the knee. It can go up to the femoral vein, right? But this is in the vein, when we're talking about vein, which is deep vein thrombosis. But let's say for some reason, we have some risk factor, whether it be some cardiac problem, some valve problem. That's where a little piece of clot can travel from there and head up to that carotid artery. So that's the higher risk there. If you have these conditions there that may cause that, lead to that clot passing and heading up to the brain.
And that's not good.
And that is, so with regards to birth control, you more look for DVT and then PE, pulmonary embolism, where the clot from the DVT, that's in the vein though, travels and gets to the lung, and that's an acute life-threatening problem. So it's a little different in terms of that.
Right. Now, Doc, in the case of the transient ischemic attack, and we mentioned earlier that it can last for about 24 hours and then things probably get back to normal. If that happens to someone, should they take it lightly? So I had a little thing, but I didn't have to go to the doctor. It ran its course, and I'm back on track. I'm okay. Should we take this lightly? The fact that you had a mini stroke, so to speak.
Right. Good question. No. You know why? Because that is a warning sign.
You have more where that it means it have more where that come from.
Bigger things to come. That's a warning sign telling you bigger things to come. So the word you use is mini. So careful. It's telling you careful. It's giving you a warning to check. Let's start checking. Let's start looking. Lifestyle changes. What factors? Do you have clotting factors? There are people with clotting factors, right? Problem with their clotting. So you have to start looking. So you visit your doctor and you check. You can get a brain scan. Sometimes, you do brain scans on patients. They may have blocked out, the simple blocked out. And when you do, you realize they had many strokes called lacunar infarcts. Small one, because the artery, the blood vessels were tiny. So the area that was affected was not a major area, and it resolved, and so forth. So it is a warning sign that you should get it checked.
Right. We have another break coming up, but just before we go to that, so someone had a stroke, let's say an ischemic, and they were able to get to the doctor quickly, and things sort of, well, I wouldn't say normalized, but they were able to stay alive. What kind of treatment, or how do we care for someone like that?
Right. And the treatment, we can figure out the treatment just going back on how this stroke occurred. So
okay.
The cells in the brain was deprived of blood supply, so it was deprived of oxygen.
Yes.
The person would need oxygen, to ensure that there's profusion of oxygen. The brain wants oxygen. It wants nutrients, right? So yes, you get the oxygen there. You now would try to look at other factors, how their blood pressure is. But at the same time, in managing the blood pressure, you don't want to reduce that pressure too much and reduce the blood that is going in, because that brain, it wants blood also.
Right.
Although, it was deprived, but you still have to supply. So you're taking, it's like, someone took something for you, but I need a little, so give me a little. So you manage that. You start looking at risk factors. You get oxygen. That's where, if it's an ischemic or thrombotic stroke, that's where the use of aspirin comes in and so forth. And you manage all the other parameters and so forth there. Sometimes you use, in other countries, they use drugs that can help, destroy clots and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that you would do in the terms of an ischemic stroke, which you may be able to go to the hospital. Someone may bring you there because you're not so severe and so forth.
Right. Also, when someone probably you had a stroke, but you end up in a situation where you're left with some sort of disability. So you may have a speech disorder, or sometimes very common, we see one side of the individual is probably immobile. You can't move as well. What causes that? Is it because lack of blood caused the tissues to die and there is permanent damage there? Or can it come back with therapy?
Yes, you can regain, the tissues can heal based on the degree, the level of infarct that you had. Mm-hmm. If you had a major one where a large area was infarcted, meaning that did not get that blood supply and the cells die, then the recovery, can be very slow, sometimes to minimal. But the earlier you reach to start that process, oxygen, reducing all the parameters to keep those as many cells as you can alive still, then that's the whole basic principle, in a nutshell for the population to understand. Then your chances are better.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Your chances are better. And ischemic, your chances are going to be better compared to hemorrhagic, because that's a bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
Although persons have survived bleeding, and that's a regular thing. Persons can survive that once, based on the level. If it's a massive bleed, then it's a problem, and we would do similar things to control that bleeding and so forth. But yes, this is what does.
Right. Final question before we go to the break. Someone in your company has a stroke. And you need to get them to the doctor. But is there anything that can be done at the spur of the moment to help that individual, probably to keep them going until they get to the doctor? I'm asking this because I've heard before, and I don't know if it's true, and I'm asking, that you can get maybe a needle or something and prick the end of the fingers of the individual for the blood to flow. Is there any truth there, or is this a myth?
Right, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Because, our population, there are lots of things we hear from time to time.
Yes.
But there are a couple of myths,
mm-hmm.
And one of them you mentioned, because we're discussing a stroke, and we have seen how it happens, what causes it,
mm-hmm.
right? And because that area was deprived, remember the brain controls your motor function and everything like that. So these cells, they can't get stimulus down. The nervous system is affected there because the tower, your control center,
mm-hmm.
can't send those impulses because cells are dying up there. And then you would have, whether it's on the right side of the brain, your left side would be affected because there's a crossing in the brain where the nerves cross. That's why you get it on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
So pricking the finger or so, unless you're testing the sugar, but it would not do anything, right? You understand?
Yes.
You understand the myth there. What would it do to help the person get more oxygen? What would it do to control their blood pressure, right? What would it do to figure out what factor or where the blood clot was, what
mm-hmm.
area of the brain? So it doesn't really do anything. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I may jump ahead of you. What's the other main myth?
Uh-huh.
It's out there. the nutmeg in the mouth.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, under the tongue. I was going to ask you about nutmeg under the tongue. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that one, and I always warn the patients. Even at home, we were talking about that, and I mentioned to someone, "Hey, careful! Never ever try to tell someone that." Listen to me. The brain, when it says die, there are lots of nerves. There are 12 pairs of nerves in the brain, and there's one that controls. There's a part of that nerve that controls the innervation, where it goes to the muscle. You know, nerves go to muscle and causes the muscle to react, to move, or whatever. It controls the swallowing. And if that is affected with the stroke, that's why we say stretch out your tongue and try to repeat. The tongue is a muscle, you know. So you see that tongue that moves, and you can roll and do everything with that tongue. How are you going to get that nutmeg out your mouth when you can't even swallow and you can't even move your tongue and control your tongue? That nutmeg is going to stay there and may choke you, and you may die.
Right. And that's a good time to go to take a commercial break. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to open our telephone lines and get some calls from our listeners and viewers. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Hills and Valley Med Care Center, located on Grenville Street, St. George's, has a highly professional team that gives excellent service in massage therapy, physiotherapy, speech therapy, medical consultation, and more. Hills and Valley Med Care Center sells a wide range of medical supplies, offers home visits for patients in Grenada and Carrier Crew, and opens Monday to Saturday, 10 a.m. through to 7 p.m. Visit or call Hills and Valley Med Care Center today, 435-6904.
How going on, boy?
Hey, good old things.
Hey, Daisy.
Yeah.
Boy, in line, boy. Your house looking a real good day.
Boy, it's thanks to the hard-working and professional staff at the Housing Authority of Grenada. They handled me real nice. They did my plan, they did the construction, and I didn't even have to worry about a thing. They were there with me every step of the way, supervising the job, asking me about my concerns, giving me feedback as the house took shape. They were there from start to finish, and even put the keys in the palm of my hand. I give them an A++ for customer service.
Oh, it's people from housing bad, boy.
Boy, not bad. Excellent. If you're thinking about constructing your home, why not consult the Housing Authority of Grenada? You could visit them right down in the Sandino complex, or give them a call, 440-1015 or 440-1016. Or check out their website, hag473.com. They go handle you. They go jog your blocks, they go draw your plan, they go tote your materials. Hey man, where you going? The Housing Authority of Grenada is your choice for affordable housing and a stress-free construction experience.
You're already ill and have no time or energy to walk every which way to access your healthcare needs. So come to Spice Isle Imaging on the Carenage for a one-spot stop for all your health service needs. See our in-house doctor and get your meds from the pharmacy right on location. Digital X-ray, MRI, CT scans, mammography, ultrasound, and laboratory services are also available. So for that moment when life makes demands on you, you can make demands on us. Visit us at Spice Isle Imaging, Carenage, St. George's.
GBN Television News at 7, a pulse on all things Grenadian. Look out for our new features through expanded synergies with our media partners in Barbados, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad, and beyond. Capturing the latest in news, sports, weather, and entertainment. Credible, informative. Thank you for making us number one. News at 7, live, Monday to Friday on GBN Television, Channel 7 and 11, K105.5 and 105.9, Hot 98.5 and 98.7, GBN Television Facebook page and YouTube channel, and www.gbn.gd. GBN, with you anywhere and everywhere.
Let's Cook Grenada, a practical culinary guide to local cuisine. Learn new ways to prepare your favorite foods or try different menus from various locations across the island. Let's Cook Tuesdays at 8 p.m. on GBN Television, Channel 7 and 11, GBN's Facebook page, and GBN's YouTube channel. If you miss it, catch the repeat Thursdays at 10 a.m. and Sundays at 3:30 p.m.
Drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Welcome back, folks. It's Doctor and Call, and we are going to go to a telephone line right now. Let's see who is with us. Doctor and Call, good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening, caller. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Dr. Bernard, good night. Continue doing your good job. The best doctor ever. Good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, caller. Doc, I hope you heard that, right?
Yes, I did, and thanks. I'm just doing the best I can, serving the people.
Yes, indeed. Let's go back to our telephone. Doctor and Call, good evening.
Good evening.
Go ahead, please, caller. Yes.
Yes, excellent program, and you both men are on the ball, and the doctor is explaining things very well. Doc, I had a stroke some years ago, and the doctor which attended to me said to me I have a mild stroke. And I don't believe there's such a thing as a mild stroke, and I'm going to explain to you why I believe that. My blood pressure was 228 over 190. That's a blood pressure that will kill you right away. Now, on further investigation with the EKG, it was discovered that my heart was enlarging, and there were other complications with me internally. So that doctor could not have been correct by telling me that I had a mild stroke when he couldn't see my internal damage, the internal damage I had. Now, I want you to make a little clarification on your response as to this particular situation with me. And I'll leave it up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Doc?
Right, I understand where the caller is coming from. Good night, caller. Now, the word mild, what I would advise, you have to have a relationship with your doctor. And if you tell your patient you have a mild stroke, then you would go on to explain why you said the word and use the word mild. If the person presented, with slight weakness of the upper limb, for example, but their speech is clear, you understand everything, and they walked into your office, you would assess them, you would do your physical examination, you would do your assessment, and you realize, well, listen to me, how long did you have that problem? And if the person said, well, doctor, 3 days, no, he has already passed that 24-hour window, right? And that first 24 hours, there hasn't seemed to be anything worse with his stroke. So you see, by just explaining that, so you would say now, well, you have a slight weakness on your left upper limb. I observed that, and we did all other things, and we realized that you don't have any weakness of the lower limb and so forth. So let's look at other things. So, and 3 days plus, then you can justify by saying this seems to be a mild. And then you work with your patient and say, well, listen to me, we're going to start to see how other things are. Maybe get a brain scan, look at your risk factors. How has your pressure been? Look at his pressure. You understand? So he had pressure problem, this patient I called, pressure problem, the problem with the heart. So you have to see your patient as a whole and work with them, because you now can guide your patient as to what is the next step. With mild, he can do therapy, he can go to the beach, do his exercise on his own. If it's what we call a major stroke, his whole left side may be affected. Sometimes that person still is talking and laughing with you in the office, right? So it depends. And I think, you just have to develop that rapport with your patient and explain. That's the thing about it, so that they can understand why maybe you said mild. So in his situation, it's based on what he presents, but you have other factors which you're not using to judge a stroke. Your pressure and other things are other factors that you need to manage that may have led to that and so forth.
Okay, let's go back to our telephone. Doctor and call, good evening. Hello?
Hello, good night.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please call us.
Yes, I'm experiencing a mild pressure on my chest. Sometime before, I had that same problem, and I went by the doctor, and he said to me that, I did an ECG, and he said that it was abnormal. Presently, I'm experiencing it's a little pressure on the chest, and I've noticed my pulse is a little higher than normal. Is there any concern there?
Thank you, caller. Doc?
Okay, so with regards to stroke, right, I'm not seeing any of the warning signs that we mentioned. And I'll just recap quickly. Numbness of the face, arm or leg. You mentioned a mild, and you use that word, mild chest. So what has to happen is that there are certain questions we ask. When did that pain start? Where is it located? Where does it radiate to? These are things you would ask about the pain, because you want to see if that chest pain you have is musculoskeletal from, the muscles, or whether it's the joint, because the rib has joints there that join to the sternum, that bone in the chest. So you need to see what's the origin of your chest pain. And with regards to stroke, we look for factors. The EKG that you mentioned is important, because when you do an EKG, your doctor is looking for another factor from the EKG that can lead to that. And that is something we didn't mention, but now, based on that question, AFib, atrial fibrillation, which is where the heart gives slight tremors. It's like a little flutter, and that is something that can cause little clots to travel. So if the doctor identifies that, then you are placed on drugs to reduce your risk of having stroke. But chest pain in itself would have to be investigated.
Okay, let's go back to our telephone. Doctor and call, good evening. Hello?
Yes, sir, good evening.
Yes, go ahead, please, caller.
Yes, Dr. Bernard, good evening. You're doing a great job of explaining and sharing the information and facts. I'm a hypertensive person, and I've been so for quite a while. I'm now in my early 60s, and what I find happening is some numbness sometimes on my little finger. It's so strange that I'm not feeling the numbness on all my fingers, but on my little finger, especially on the left hand. I don't know if there is any indication related to what you have discussed, but I just thought let me mention it for what it's worth. And earlier on, you spoke about the leg behind the pain behind the knee. Talk a little bit more of that for me, please, because today I was getting this really severe pain right behind my knee, but I'm not really feeling it right now. But I'm really serious about the pain behind my knee, because I thought it's strange. I said, well, what is this thing? And I was sort of monitoring that particular thing. And strange enough, I'm hearing you mention that today. Well, it's gone. I'm not feeling it, but I just want you to share a little bit more on that pain, because I do suffer also from varicose vein problems and poor circulation in the leg. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. And, I'm glad the caller mentioned that last part about the varicose veins. Because, callers, you also need to understand that in order for Dr. Bernard to give you a proper diagnosis, you would have to visit him. He operates in Grenville. I think I know where he operates. Just as if you enter in Grenville from St. Patrick, right at the upper entrance, his office is there on the left, close to the bus stop. So you can visit Dr. Bernard there. That way he can do a full examination and can diagnose your issue. He can share information here, but as it relates to the diagnosis, you would have to go visit him in Grenville. Let's go back to our telephone. Dr. and Call, good evening.
Good night, sir.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Right, good program. Could I get explanation for the term good and bad cholesterol and systolic and diabolic blood pressure?
Thank you, caller. Thank you very much indeed. All right, Doc, quickly. So let's we need to backtrack a little bit. The lady's question, the pain behind the knee and the little numbness and so that she mentioned, then we'd come to that last call as it relates to systolic and diastolic pressure and what was the other thing he mentioned? Good and bad cholesterol.
Okay, so to answer quickly the first caller, the previous caller. Numbness to the little finger, when you hear the word numbness, first of all, it's not a disease. It's a symptom. I mean, the patient complains of that problem. So that's why we call it a symptom. So the doctor is not seeing anything there, but the person is saying, Doc, I have numbness there. So it's a symptom. And usually is the word, it's related to nerve. There is a nerve that runs on the median nerve in the arm, and then you have the ulnar nerve. And if there's a symptom called the carpal tunnel syndrome, where the nerve gets trapped when it enters into the hand. It has to pass through a little orifice, a little opening to enter. And that nerve has branches that goes to the little finger. So maybe she then has to check, her physician, whether it be a general physician, orthopedic, and see if that is the cause of it. But also vitamin deficiencies can cause that. People tend to sleep on one side. They don't, do little physical activities. Guys hold weed eaters and cutlasses for long hours, and they sleep at night and they get numbness because the whole day they're doing that work. So there are a lot of different causes of numbness. There are also other diseases. So in that respect, that can be checked on with that. With regards to the good and bad cholesterol, yes, cholesterol is important. We mentioned that earlier on. And the difference is what we call bad cholesterol. It's a term that we use. It refers to the LDL. So when you visit your doctor and you do your total lipid profile and they're explaining your results, and you say, Doc, how is my bad cholesterol? The bad is the LDL. It's a low density lipid. That is a type of fat in the body, in the blood, that contributes to the buildup in the artery walls of plaque. So it just tends to build up more in the walls. And what we said is that wall, they get narrow, you have buildup of plaque, and later on, some of that plaque could break off and so forth, or build up until it occludes totally and blood cannot pass. The HDL, or the good cholesterol, what it does, it helps remove cholesterol from the arteries. And that's why we keep stressing these things. We keep stressing that people eat healthy and use some of the unsaturated oils. And there's a list of them. Avocado, we have that in season now. That's a healthy type of fat that would help you pull away some of that build-up and so forth. Vegetable oil, olive oil, fatty fish, mackerel and salmon. These are the foods that give you the healthy oils. And to end with the diastolic and the systolic, I think that's what he asked.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Systolic blood pressure is when your heart pushes or pumps that blood. So that pressure, when your heart pushes that blood, is the systolic. And the diastolic is when the blood comes to fill back it has to stay firm. So you have to stay firm to resist that blood that is coming back. Otherwise, you have another problem. So this is what the systolic and the diastolic. So you can have a pressure where the systolic is high or where both are high.
All right. Let's go back to our telephone. Dr. and call, good evening. Good evening, caller.
Good evening.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Dr. Bernard, I would like to ask you a question. I have a member of my family who has a stroke on his left side about a year now, and he cannot do nothing with the left side. Although he gets therapy, he cannot do anything with it. Can you tell me what kind of stroke he has and what can be done to help him sit up or use his left hand and so forth?
Thank you, caller. Thank you. Doc?
Caller, sad to hear that situation. You know, sometimes there are things we can do to help, and there's sometimes it's beyond our reach. Now, if the area of the brain that was affected was a large area, he had an occlusion that affected a large area, and that part died and gave him that stroke on the left side, that means it would have been on the right side of the brain. If he was not brought in time, if the rehabilitation, was not, done in time, there are a number of factors. So it depends. If that area was that area died completely, then sometimes the outcome is poor. And, if you had a CT scan, then your doctors would have sat with you and discussed and let you know what's the prognosis. The prognosis means, listen, we can do that amount to get such measure, but there are cases where you can be paralyzed, you can be left with that left-sided weakness and unable to move. So what my advice is, keep turning the person, keep putting him in positions, whether you have to use pillows and so to prop, so that he does not, or the person does not develop pneumonia from lying for long hours. So these are things that you'd have to do, and it's important. In part of the treatment, sometimes family support and care is the answer.
Yes, indeed. And that's a very important part of it. I was going to close with that question in terms of caring for patients that have experienced this type of strokes, because as we heard from the caller, that individual cannot use one side. There are some people, they become totally immobile. There's loss of speech, loss of movement, and they're just there. And it can be very difficult for family members. What would you say to a family member? Let's say, for example, you have a wife and a husband. The husband has the stroke. He's unable to move. He's totally immobile. That's a lot of pressure on the wife, especially if we're talking about people who are already up in age. What would you say to her, Doc, in terms of support and dealing with a situation like that?
Yes, she has to have faith. She has to keep going day after day, because if you're going back, you made a vow until death do us part. So you have to be there, love, support, and care. Sometimes we have problems, but others have more than us, right? Someone may have a weakness in the upper limb, but they're speaking, they're laughing, they're joking, they're enjoying life, they're taking life as it comes, one day at a time, giving praise to the Almighty, right? That person may have a stroke on the left side, but they're using the right side and they still have speech, right? And we have many patients like that, and they come willingly to the health center, and they come using their cane, right? Presently, I have an uncle, and he cannot use neither the right, neither the left side. And what are we doing? We are supporting. And when I visit him, we laugh and still give joke, So she has to be strong, continue, and all other family members give encouragement, give support. And we should make it through.
Right. Well, Doc, it's 5 minutes to 10. It's just about time for us to wrap for this evening. So let me just ask you to quickly just summarize what we spoke about. What is a stroke, the different types, and some other things we can do to help prevent it.
Okay, so for those that missed the program, we talked about stroke, and stroke is very important. Is where blood is occluded, does not go to the brain as it should, and that is what we call an ischemic. The blood vessel, just like a pipe where water comes in, can burst, and that blood spills out in the brain. You can also have a little leakage, and there are many factors that contribute to that. And mention a couple: healthy lifestyle, manage your cholesterol, manage your blood pressure, manage your diabetes, right? Do your regular checkups so your doctor can see if there are risk factors that can lead to that, right? Those that can afford, when you do your little diagnostic test, you can ultrasound the carotid arteries to see if there are blockage there. Then important for persons in Grenada, the warning signs. If you're with someone, you're laughing, you're playing, you're having a dinner, the warning signs: numbness, the speech gets muffled, slurred, weakness on one side. Remember, fast, face, arm, speech, and time, and you move in time. So when you move in time, they can get treatment, they can get oxygen, they can get aspirin. Things can be done to avoid major damage and leaving that person with a major weakness on one side, or damage that may not be reversible, as in the case of the patient we mentioned. And finally, to wrap, my role as a physician in the community: prevention, prevention, prevention. And young persons now, less than 40, even in the early 50s, high blood pressure is becoming one of the leading factors for developing stroke. So let us manage that. Do your regular checkups so that we can avoid having stroke and to deal with the consequences. And in some cases, it can be a burden for some once you have the stroke.
Right, yes indeed. And folks, as I told you earlier, Dr. Bernard has been sharing with us a lot of very important information, but he cannot diagnose you on the telephone. You would have to go see him. He's in Grenville, and of course, you can get a proper diagnosis then. Dr. Bernard, I want to thank. I am thanking you. I am really thankful that you accepted my invitation, and I also must say thanks to Dr. Francis for encouraging me to speak to you, to encourage you to come to the program. I'm indeed thankful and grateful that you accepted the invitation and you're here. And clearly from our listeners and viewers, they're quite happy with what you've shared with us. And on that note, let me say to you that this is your first, but it won't be your last. I'll be calling you again. I will be calling you again. So thank you once again very much for being on the program, and we look forward to having you again sometime soon.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for all those that viewed and listened, and all the best.
Thank you, Doc. All the best, and we'll talk soon. That was our program this evening, folks. Dr. Andy Bernard operates out of Grenville in St. Andrew. Is also a community physician, visits a lot of the medical stations, and I can tell you, I know he has a lot of wonderful patients who have a lot of confidence in him. So it wouldn't hurt to go see Dr. Bernard in Grenville, yeah? Take it from me. Thank you again, folks. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Tomorrow, our first released program after my vacation. And I promise you, we are going to have a great time. We've got a lot of things to talk about. I missed out on something, so tomorrow Alan is going to be here and we are going to definitely release it. Thank you once again, and do have a good night.
Drug abuse, cancer,